Okay, we're talking to Colin Wilson here at Supanova in Perth. Colin, thanks for talking to us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, you're a bit of a regular on the Supanova tours over the years. You've appeared at a few conventions now.
Yeah, these days I try to do as many as I can because
Yep.
it's just such a change in the last 2 years to actually have so many in Australia, and it's a great opportunity to meet with the fans and get out and about a bit as well because locked away in a studio just looking out the same window all the time can get a bit boring.
You get to do a bit of travel and that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is kind of nice, and it reminds me of back in the French days of being able to get to conventions fairly regularly and meet the fans that way.
Now, you do commissions at the conventions you attend. Do you have like a favourite type of commission that you might get asked to do?
Not so much a favourite, but more I try to avoid getting asked to do characters that I know nothing about.
Right.
Because of not being a mainstream superhero artist. There's a lot of characters out there that I have no idea what they are, and of course you can't really do something spectacular or something really that I'm really happy with on a character that you're not familiar with.
Right.
So my favourite characters are the ones that I can more or less draw straight off the top because I'm so familiar with them for such a long period of time working in printing actual pages of them.
Yeah. Now, when did the idea of comics and getting into comics first come to you? When did you start pursuing it?
It's kind of hard to tell because I probably drew comics ever since I was a kid, just on rolls of paper and kind of narrative kind of structure of things because I was always reading comics in the 50s and 60s in New Zealand, and so I was always doing things like that, and I discovered the world of fandom in the late 70s, and so starting a comics fanzine was a way of, first of all, publishing some of my sort of amateur work, but also getting to know other people, and it was a great means to actually get to discover that there were quite a few other people out there doing things that they were just doing for fun. And so I published that for a while, but it wasn't until I went to the UK in 1980 on holiday that I suddenly discovered that there was actually a way of earning a living doing comics.
Yeah. And when you, in your earlier days of starting to draw, could you sort of see, I've got some natural talent in this and I'm going to keep working at it, or did you feel, I'm really bad, but I love drawing, I'm just going to keep
Well, I think most of us feel that we were always really bad because we're aware of our mistakes and that kind of things. But it's the feedback that really, we all got egos, and it's nice to be able to do something that seems to work for other people. And kind of in one way, it's the entertainment business as well. It's just great to be able to do something that someone appreciates. Yeah. And when you get the chance to start working on famous characters or characters that you've created that have become really successful, and there's an audience out there, it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling kind of loop where you want to do better each time as well.
Yeah. And you've worked with some really interesting writers over the years, Tom Taylor, of course, and Ed Brubaker. What sort of level of engagement do you like with the writer on a project that you're working on? Do you like a lot of back and forth throughout the process, or do you like to get the script and just be left alone and then go back with the pages? Or?
I think probably always like to be left alone with the script, but in actual fact that's often not the best way to do it. But in the old days with 2000 AD, often I never met with the writers, I never knew them, whereas as soon as I could start to actually work with people that I could get to know a little bit, as well, really kind of helped. Maybe not for the day-to-day contact, but just in a general sense, because I've always been very careful trying to pick and choose projects that I actually would enjoy doing. And part of that, I think, is to actually realise that you're kind of on the same wavelength with whoever's writing it, and you can talk about getting something set up and underway in a more general sense with writers. I find that more interesting. And so the Tom collaboration on Star Wars has been brilliant because we talked through a lot of that before we even got the chance to do it.
So was having, with technology today, it sort of bridges the gap between countries, and you can liaise with other people easier. But did having Tom sort of locally more accessible make a difference in that sense?
From an involvement point of view, it was tremendous to be able to have someone so close at hand, because it was completely by coincidence we discovered we were next more or less in the same neighbourhood of Melbourne, and so to be able to meet up, and it gets to a stage where you often are talking about anything but the actual work that we're doing, because
Okay.
I want to leave the writer to go away and do his thing. And once you get on a certain wavelength with someone who you realise knows exactly what they're doing, you can then just pick up the script and work away and on it, and then show it to the writer when it's more fully realised. And then if there's any corrections need to be made, you can do it at that stage. Just much more fun having that personal contact, and rather than just being seen off overseas to an editor. That's a fantastic advantage, but it does have its downside as well.
Was Star Wars something you'd wanted to do for a while, or was it an idea that sort of Tom brought up? Or?
It was something that I'd been approached several times to do before, but the timing hadn't been right. The editor had seen a lot of my work in the 80s, probably the 2000 AD work, and had contacted me several times, but if you're kind of committed to doing something else and you're going to be busy for the next year, it doesn't kind of fit into their scheduling. But finally we kind of got together, and I started doing work on Star Wars before I met Tom. And in actual fact, that was one of the main reasons why we got along so well before we started to work together, because he started supplying me with a lot of reference material, books that he had already, and I kind of quickly realised that he actually knew an awful lot more about Star Wars than I did. Kind of having someone like that's a really tremendous resource, because you've got to be aware of not making mistakes, because it's a pretty complex universe, and you can make some silly errors if you haven't got someone looking over your shoulder occasionally and saying no, that actually shouldn't be done that way.
Like fits with the continuity.
And that's such a complex world, and I wasn't all that familiar with the second 3 films as well, so that was kind of important to actually go back and get told to look out for certain things, and kind of get the fundamentals at least all pointing in the right direction.
And so you've done a lot of work in the European comics industry as well as the US industry?
Yeah, probably 50% of my output over the last 30 years has been for Europe, and it's work that's never appeared in English.
What strikes you as, so say, the biggest kind of difference between the two industries, and from your kind of point of view?
Well, the biggest obvious difference is the format. Comics are produced in such a different way, with 54-page hardcover, full colour books. Called albums in France, and there's a lot of them produced, and they're treated a lot more seriously in the way that it's considered an art form, which is a really different way of treating comics than the English-speaking language countries look at the medium. And so it has a different approach to it, in the sense where on a business level and on a creative level, it's much more of a mature market as well, because you're treated as an author, and therefore authors in French law are protected, so you own your own IP, you have control over the work that you create a lot more in Europe than you do in the States especially.
Okay, sounds like the editorial process is quite different.
Yes, well, especially for a newcomer, because typically in the States you'll be approached by one of the majors to work on a character that they own and control, whereas in Europe you tend to, the way to do it is to team up with a writer or an artist together. They'll prepare a project and then they'll pitch it at any number of editors they can, and with the hope of actually signing a contract with someone for the beginnings of a series. And therefore, after that, the editor will have the option on subsequent albums if they become well enough established for the series to continue.
And now, so you've done different kinds of work, different genres. You've done some Judge Dredd and Losers, as we mentioned, and Star Wars, of course. Do you have a preferred sort of genre, the future sci-fi or?
Not really. The thing that's been something that's been vital for me is to actually be able to change. Not be just kind of locked into just being a science fiction comic artist. It's just nice to be able to have had the chance to work in so many different genres, because it keeps you fresh. I kind of like doing the research and getting the kind of feel for the genre that I'm working in, and it's always, it might necessarily show, other than trying to look as authentic as possible in the actual artwork, but it's just nice to be able to be buried in the West for a while. And then at the moment I'm working on a new detective series set in San Francisco in the 80s. So I'm just walking the streets of San Francisco using Google Street View and just doing screen grabs of buildings and stuff that I can use. And
like reference points.
And because I've got a kind of very realistic style, and it's important to just drop in lots of little authentic detail, so that it actually just adds to the feel and the look of it.
Yeah. Now, AccessReel.com is mostly a movie website,
Mm-hmm.
and Hollywood has invaded the world of comics.
It certainly has.
So completely.
Well, comics have invaded the world of movies,
Yeah,
maybe.
What are some of your favourite? What ones that they've made kind of stand out to you that they really nailed it in terms of translating? Not necessarily literally, but the spirit of the character on screen. And
Well, it's a little bit more difficult for me because I'm not such a huge superhero person, and certainly at the moment that's where the major amount of big Hollywood movies are being based on, and that kind of franchise. Whereas
did you like the Dredd?
I was very impressed with the Dredd, actually. I didn't think I was going to be, and I'd avoided the first one.
Yeah.
For a long time. I still haven't seen it actually, but
the Stallone one you avoided, but the Carl Urban one you saw?
Yeah. And it seemed that the buzz was good on it. John Wagner was over, said they were doing a really good job on it, and everyone looked as if they were really trying their best on what was probably a fairly limited budget.
Yeah.
And although I remained to be convinced early on in the film, as I got into it, the second half, it slowly dawned on me that they were actually doing a really good job. The important thing with Dredd is the mood, that kind of doom-laden hopelessness of it all, and that I thought they got across really well.
Yeah, well, hopefully they get the chance to continue it, because I think they captured it fairly well.
At the moment, I think it's just kind of cult classic.
Yeah,
They need the character more well established, probably in the US market for it to be a major box office success. But hopefully, everyone's working at it to get the chance of getting more.
Okay, thanks for talking to us, Colin.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
I hope you have a great rest of the convention weekend. I hope to see you back in Perth for another Supanova in future years.
No, thanks very much. It's been good fun.
Thank you.